Before we start this video, a word from our sponsor. It's me. I'm the sponsor. Take it away, me. Hi again, my second intro because I don't know how to start recordings. What I'm going to talk about in this video is mature content on the Webtoon platform, mostly Canvas because Webtoon featured originals have somewhat of a different standard, but I will go into a little bit of what I know from seeing certain things going down there, so I'll add that in a little bit, but this is mostly going to be focused on posting mature content or having a mature themed comic on Webtoon Canvas. I had to find my notes, but then after I read them I realized that they're garbage, so I had to write new notes, so here we go. Having mature content on Webtoon is a bit of a slippery slope because from the experiences of other people and my own experience, with Canvas, Webtoon, the actual overlords can't see, they can't monitor everything, so they rely on the report button. So your series currently has to be reported by 10 people for Webtoon to look at it and see that there's a problem. So if there's content on Webtoon that looks a little risque that one person's doing, it may still be up there because not enough people have seen it and reported it, whereas another Canvas comic, a lot of people may have seen it and reported it, so that's why some people get taken down and some people don't. It's literally just who sees it, how many people report it, and then Webtoon actually going after it once they've seen it's been reported 10 times. And the 10 times rule hasn't always been a thing. I heard that it used to be only 3 people report it, 3 strikes, and they had to bump it up to 10 because people were abusing that system. So 10, it's a little more difficult. Preface everything, that's basically how it works on Canvas. You have to be reported for Webtoon to actually take issue, but it's kind of a gamble to know whether or not you're going to be reported because it's generally the more views you get, the more likely it is. If you get more views, it's more likely that you'll be reported if you go against the terms of service than if you hardly get any views and people don't really see you, then you might not get reported. But we're going for just generally if you get a decent amount of views, what you need to look out for and what you need to do if you're going to post mature content or make a mature comic for Canvas. Man, I need some caffeine or something because I am flubbing so many lines. I found some tea, so that will just have to do. Now, before we start with my tips and tricks and stuff, we need to look at the terms of service that Webtoon Canvas has created for us to overview, so let me just I'm not actually looking anything up, I just wanted that to sound like I was doing something important. I just have the tab already opened. I'm sorry, I deceived you. Anyway, so we need to look at the content guidelines. We've got mature or, this is YouTube. I need a word for this, sponge cake content? Yeah, that'll be sponge cake. So that word right there will be sponge cake. So I will refer to that as sponge cake so I don't get demonetized. So content that contains birthday suits or intended to be sponge cake gratifying is not allowed. This includes, but not limited to, full or partial birthday suits, as well as graphic depictions of sponge cake acts. So what that means is, if I'm not allowed to say it, you're not allowed to do it, basically. On Webtoon Canvas, at least, if I'm not allowed to say it. Basically, no sponge cake. Just don't put any sponge cake in your Webtoons. I'll get more into detail, but that's what that means. The mature content warning feature should be used to identify mature themes and content, including topics of sponge cake. Wait, this is... Okay. Preference of sponge cake. Topics of preference of sponge cake. However, please note that utilizing the mature content warning feature does not mean that birthday suits or explicit sponge cake is allowed on the platform. So basically what that means is the mature content warning is useless. for the most part, it's kind of useless. But we're moving on. Violent or graphic content. And I can say this stuff, so they're a bit more lenient. We do not allow graphic depictions of, gratuitous violence or content that promotes acts of violence. Examples of prohibited content include, brutal or extended scenes of violence, depictions of 50 Shades, or glorifications or promotions of 50 Shades. None of that. And then glorification or promotion of, am I allowed to say some of this stuff on YouTube? I have no idea. Doing harm to personal, you're not, don't put that in there. I'm gonna, I'm showing this as I read it so you can read along, but I have to fudge around with these titles as I say them. Okay. Spam, you're not allowed to spam. And then reporting inappropriate content. So this is where, the people who read content report you and then you get in trouble and all that. So to report inappropriate comments, click the report button, and then the reported episode that violates content guidelines, click, at the end of episode. Episodes with multiple reports, which I've heard to be 10, may be automatically removed until further. They will be removed unless it's just I guess if people are there's nothing mature in it, if there's a bunny rabbit and it's just sitting there and people don't like it so they report it, then Webtoon will probably be that's silly and then throw it out. But if there's iffy content, then Webtoon will probably just take it down and then email you. If the same episode and series is reported repeatedly, and if we determine that the report is justified, the episode or series may be removed. I haven't seen any series where the entire thing gets removed, but that might happen. I don't know. And the user will receive a warning. Yeah. In case the content is found to be excessively inappropriate, the user has multiple violations, we may suspend or terminate the account. Fun stuff with that. I think we're done there. So we've read the terms of service and all of the things about Sponge Cake. So now I'm going to break down what to do about all of that and what exactly that kind of means because whenever you read the general terms of service, it might be okay, but where do we draw the line? And I've kind of got an idea where the line is, but I think it differs. You have to check, maybe look at other series and find a middle ground that fits for your specific situation. But if your goal is to make a mature comic, it's a good idea to have a Patreon or some kind of site that allows mature content. So that way you can have your full vision posted somewhere and then censor it for Webtoon. That's what I do, but in a general sense, my rule for Webtoon is just don't post anything mature because that's the safest way. But if you're going to post mature content, you want to treat Webtoon very carefully if you want to be monetized on that website and not be taken down by reports. So there's the two types of mature content. There's violence and Sponge Cake. I'm going to get into violence first, and then we'll move and leave the Sponge Cake for later. With violence, it's usually content containing fights, battles, weapons, blood-related content, things of that nature. You want to keep blood to a very minimum, and violent acts, you want to be very light on them or imply as much as possible, especially when it comes to gory details. Just imply most of that. You can have people punching each other, that's no big deal, or sword fighting, just don't show gore or body parts flying everywhere. That's probably not a good idea. Censor that kind of stuff and calm it down for Webtoon. When my series that is no longer up was reported for violence and blood because my characters had too much blood on their clothes, and the way to fix that is either make it a weird color like blue, purple, some other color than red, because red blood is the issue here. That's what a lot of anime have issues with, is the red blood. That's why they'll turn it black or turn it some weird color or invert the screen so it doesn't look like red blood. With battles and fights, you don't want to show somebody in a pulpy mess, but you can show sword fighting where, they slice, but have it where the slice isn't just super gory, have it, with some kind of effect so you can tell what's going on, but there's not a lot of gore and stuff going on with the scene itself. Try to be creative with it and find creative ways to get around the censors. That's generally a good thing to do, to watch like anime or some series that have had to go through the censors and see what they do to get around it. And that's a pretty good reference point, because like Dead Man Wonderland is one of those series where it has a lot of gore, but they censored it in a way where it doesn't really show that much. There's like the scene, and I hate the scene because it censors so much, but they have to do it where he's getting his eye cut out or something, or removed, and they just black out the whole scene so you can't see anything. And that sometimes is what you have to do if you don't want to cut out the scene entirely. When it comes to acts where the character's enjoying the pain that they're inflicting on another character, it's generally a good idea to not really focus on that or put a lot of that in the series, because it will more than likely get reported, because generally they don't really like that on Webtoon. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I can think of whenever it comes to the violent aspect. Just have minimal blood, don't have viscera flying everywhere, and censor the blood in some way. Make it a different color or minimize it, and it should be a-okay. Bruises and little cuts, things of that nature, shouldn't really be an issue. I've had comments back from Webtoon staff, and they've generally been okay with that kind of stuff. Just keep in mind not to overdo it. If you have a scene that's really important to your story, but you're not sure how to go about it because it's excessively violent or something of that nature, try to find a way to abstractly put it in your comic, like have a flower that's been like beaten up, or an orange that's turned into a pulp, some kind of thing like that. I'm just picking like fruit and flower themed things because that's off the top of my head, but I'm sure you can think of other things. Maybe even have like a stuffed animal that's been ripped to shreds, and it mirror with the character in some creative way. So you're showing what's happening, but not in a gory way or excessive way that could be something that gets you reported. Now we can get into the sponge cake, and all of you should know what I mean when I say sponge cake. It is two people in their birthday suits enjoying some sponge cake. And it is not allowed on Webtoon because that's just too spicy of content. And when I say people, I am including things like aliens and other creatures, anything, vampires, whatever. Any individuals enjoying sponge cake in their birthday suits is sponge cake. First, we'll talk about birthday suits, and the amount of birthday suit you can show varies depending on whether your character presents as male or female. With male presenting characters, generally from the belly button up is completely okay, and of course, like if the character is wearing shorts or something and you see the legs, that's another area. You just want to cover up the swimsuit area on male presenting bodies and you'll be a-okay. Now, it gets kind of convoluted with female presenting characters because the swimsuits are generally considered okay with female characters, but I have had a female character that was fully clothed, but you could see her line where the leg connects to the torso. That line right there, it was showing even though she was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, and I sent that to get reviewed, and the person who commented back, I was sending it about a completely different issue because my character had bruises and I wanted to know if that was okay. But what I got back was the hip lines were not okay. Those needed to be covered up because that was inappropriate. Even though there was nothing inappropriate in the scene, it was actually very much the opposite, but those hip lines were bad because she was female, I guess. I don't know, but that was bad, so I had to cover them up with the shorts, pull the shorts up and get rid of those lines, and then it was a-okay. Basically, with female characters, cover up the swimsuit area and don't have any defining line detail that could be too risque. When it comes to engaging in sponge cake activities, generally just don't put it in your comic, imply it. Even if the people censor it by just showing the face and not showing the detail of what's happening, I've still seen so many Canvas comics that get taken down because of that. So it's a good idea just to not put it in there because they don't let anything fly of that nature. And they're even sensitive with this when it comes to featured series from what I've seen, because with violence, they're a little more lenient. I've seen Webtoon original series that have way more violence than I had in my comics, and my comics got reported where featured series are completely okay. So the violence is like, there's a double standard there. But when it comes to Sponge Cake, they're generally, they don't really allow it on their platform, even if the comic is rated mature. Because I remember I was reading one featured series, or Webtoon original, it was featured back then. But I was reading one original series where the character, and it wasn't even that graphic, the character, goes to the love interest, and they it showed like them in like their bed together, and you couldn't see any details, they were covered up, but you knew what they were doing. And I read it when it first came out, and then I went back a little while later, and that whole scene was gone. It had been removed because they decided that was not okay. And then there was another scene in the same comic where she was having a vision, and you could see the back of the guy, from his legs up, you could see that, but it didn't show the front, it just showed the back. And that was up whenever the comic first got posted, and then came back a little bit later because I think I reread the whole series, and that scene was also gone. So with Sponge Cake, it's not really allowed in Canvas, and it's not allowed in featured series unless some of them I've seen where they have a bit more leniency with featured series that I've seen, because there's been other ones where they just show the face, where it's what they're doing, but it's just showing the face, and it's okay in featured series but not okay in Canvas series. So there's still the double standard where you want to be really careful on Canvas because we're on a different level than the featured people, so we got to be more careful and step on eggshells. But if you get featured, then whatever. But this is why you have a Patreon or something, so you can just post the full version or bonus content that has all the goodies in it, and nobody can say anything because it's got a barrier around it, unless Patreon decides that that's not allowed, which would be a very sad day, and we'd have to find another platform. I don't know what, I'd have to look. So from all of that, the best thing to do with Sponge Cake content is to not post it, just imply it. It's too risky, and too many people have been reported for it. So just keep the Sponge Cake implied, find a way to do that. Maybe show just part of the bed, the very top of it, or show, and not have any of the characters in the scene, or have, I remember I saw one series where it showed a manga drawing of the characters, completely appropriate, no inappropriate things being shown, but it had flowers all around them, and it's oh, we confirmed our relationship, and it was all romantic, where they didn't show anything, but they showed that flowery scene where it's yeah, it happened. Or the other thing is, they're kissing and all that stuff, and it switches to the next day where it's oh, what they did, but you didn't see anything, and you can have join my Patreon and you can see the full scene, and then you get more revenue on your Patreon. All good. Yeah. If you have an episode you're not sure about, there is an email address. They've said that you can contact them through this and ask questions. It's called Webtoon Support, and you email them with the file that contains your episode of the content you're not sure about, and you just say, hey, I'm a Webtoon Canvas creator. I'm not sure if this episode's appropriate or not, or if anything needs to be censored. Thanks for the feedback, if you can get back to me whenever. And they generally contact you within 1 or 2 days. That's been my experience. And they'll either say everything's a-okay, or they'll say what needs to be censored. If your character's showing too much skin, they'll say cover them up a bit or take out those details. If there's too much blood or gore, they'll say, cut back on the blood, do something with that, or this panel isn't appropriate, take it out, or find a way to fix it. I've only had a few experiences where they've said I needed to fix something, and it was very mild changes. Bruises were generally okay, things of that nature. So that's one resource, so that way you won't get reported. You've already checked with them and saw that everything was okay. those are my tips, and I'll do a little recap. With violence, don't show too much blood. If you have to change the colors or censor it, any kind of violence, censor it in a creative way. Same thing with sponge cake. Find a way to censor it in a creative way, and don't show really anything. Birthday suits, males can have six-pack, females need to wear a pretty decent bathing suit. Don't show too much, and you shouldn't get reported. Everything should be fine. Plug your Patreon, get those not safe views and money, and you should be all good. Happy mature contenting on Webtoon. Bye. Hey, I have to come back in because I don't think I've said a swear word in this episode, and I have to say at least one, so my episode isn't marked as for children, but it has to be a mild swear so I don't get demonetized. So, ass.